Good morning, good afternoon, what have you. It's Thursday. They just dropped a huge patch notes with a bunch of buffs for the weapons and stratagems we use and haven't used in a while. So let's get straight into it for patch notes 1.0004. So let's go through the weapons and stuff first. So the rocket sentry got decreased spread, prioritizes larger targets, increased target distance from 75 to 100 meters, decreased rockets per salvo 2 to 1 to get better ammo capacity, increased explosion radius from 1 meter to 4 meters, decreased explosion armor penetration though, so explosions can no longer damage heavy armored enemies. The projectile still has enough armor penetration to damage heavy armored targets though. So I'm not really sure what they mean by that, because they just said it can no longer damage heavy armored enemies and then just say it still has enough armor penetration to damage heavily armored targets. That's just a weird sentence. So I'm not sure what they mean by that, but I imagine it's something like a buff. And they have increased projectile damage from 200 to 300 for that rocket sentry. Moving on, the machine gun sentry has reduced cooldown from 180 to 120 seconds. That's huge. The machine gun sentry, the Gatling sentry, the rocket sentry, the autocannon sentry, the mortar sentry, and the EMS mortar sentry all have increased durability from 0% to 80%. The HMG emplacement has increased rotational speed by 100%. The anti-personnel minefield has increased explosion damage from 250 to 350, and the incendiary mines have increased explosion damage from 150 to 210. That's huge because they're trying to introduce more waves of enemies rather than just keeping them all like Bile Titan and Chargers. So like the heavy armored, they're trying to like spread it out. So the mines should probably be more useful now. I'd love to test that out. The orbital Gatling has increased fire rate to 25%, increased rounds per salvo from 30 to 60, increased armor penetration so it can damage heavy armor targets, and decreased cooldown from 80 seconds to 70 seconds. I use this in the game. It feels great. The orbital Gatling, honestly, it feels like it's always up, and it lasts for so long. It lasts for so much longer, almost like double. It's basically like double the duration that it had. With the armor penetration is super nice. The orbital precision strike has decreased cooldown from 100 seconds to 90 seconds with decreased spawn and call-in timer from 4 seconds to 2 seconds. I used it though, and it still seemed to have that call-in time of 4 seconds for the orbital precision strike, but maybe it was just the planet that I was playing on. The orbital airburst strike though also got a cooldown decrease from 120 to 100 seconds, so I'm excited to use that. The rocket pods, the rocket pods, while these changes may look like a straight nerf, it's not the intention. Please see the blog post for more information. So they basically improved the targeting, increased the projectile armor penetration, so it now does 100% damage to heavily armored instead of 50, and decreased the projectile damage from 600 to 250, which is a huge change. But they said that's to compensate for the improved targeting and extra damage from the increased armor penetration. And they also decreased the explosion armor penetration, so it can no longer damage heavily armored enemies. Again, I'm not really sure what that sentence is supposed to mean, because they just said they increased projectile armor penetration, so it attacks heavily armored enemies better. I don't know. It's weird. I don't know why they say that. But it sounds kind of like a nerf, but I'll have to test out the rocket pods myself. And I'd love to see them be more useful. I'm really glad that they made a bunch of changes to the less used stratagems, so now you can kind of like just decide to take whatever you want, and the runs will be so different. So the Eagle Strafing run, I also use that in this video you're watching. It has increased uses from 3 to 4. I have it maxed, so I have 5 uses. It increased armor penetration and now can damage heavily armored targets. It does damage them. It doesn't do a massive amount, but you do see it damage them, which is kind of nice. It's honestly very fun to use, especially now that they got buffed. I never really used it before, so I'm still getting used to it. I didn't realize it fired in a straight line. Like when you throw it, it goes basically south to north. But yeah, I'll get used to it. I mean, it's pretty fun. I enjoy it. Anything with like fast cooldowns and big AoE is pretty good right now. The grenade launcher also got an explosive damage buff by a 350 to 400, so that's an increase in 50 damage. The heavy machine gun increased projectile damage from 100 to 150, increased projectile damage against durable body parts from 23 to 33%, decreased fire rate from 450, 750 to 900 to 450, 600, and 750. Which is nice. Decreased reload time from 7 to 5.5 seconds, which is huge. That reload took forever. And increased stagger strength. So they basically tried to buff the HMG. I would have liked the magazine size was a little bit increased, maybe to 100 instead of kept at 75. But they did increase its damage, honestly, by 50. So who knows? It might be really good now. The machine gun, the MG43, decreased reload time from 4 to 3.5 seconds and increased maximum amount of mags from 3 to 4, which is nice. The machine gun sentry, the Gatling sentry, and the XL45 Patriotic Exosuit Gatling all increased projectile damage from 80 to 90 and increased projectile damage against durable body parts from 7.5% to 25%. That's huge. The AR-23 Liberator, the M105 Stalwart, the AXAR-23 Guard Dog all increased projectile damage against durable body parts from 10 to 23%. So that'll be your assault rifle, your Liberator. Your Stalwart is the light machine gun, basically, and the Guard Dog, everyone, yeah. No one really uses that, but I used it, and it was honestly pretty decent against bots. It was kind of fun. I've been using it more lately. But it's good to see that get buffed, honestly. The Liberator Concussive, another assault rifle, increased projectile damage against durable body parts from 23% to 35%. Nice. The BR-14 Adjudicator increased magazine capacity from 25 to 30% and increased projectile damage against durable body parts from 10 to 20%. So another big buff. The AR-61 Tenderizer increased projectile damage from 60 to 95. So that's like a 35 damage buff. It increased projectile damage against durable body parts from 10 to 17%, but decreased ammo capacity from 35 to 30. Decreased number of magazines from 10 to 8, but increased its stagger strength. So it got an overall pretty big buff, honestly. The Tenderizer might actually be pretty viable. It's probably one of the second highest damaging assault rifles that are out there now, so that's nice. The Plas 101 Purifier increased projectile armor penetration to be the same as the explosion and decreased explosion damage fall off. That's nice. I would have liked some kind of damage increase to the charge, because I felt like the charging it up didn't really increase the damage that much. But I'll have to see with the change in the projectile armor penetration. Maybe it got a lot better now. We'll have to test that. The explosive crossbow increased explosion armor penetration to be the same as the projectile, increased demolition strength so it can now destroy bug holes and bot fabricator buildings, and added medium penetration tag. This is huge. Honestly, it really just needed to destroy bug holes and bot fabricators to be useful, because I mean it's okay, but like an explosive weapon not plugging a bug hole, like come on, like that was the dumbest thing. So I'm glad that they changed that. That should be really nice with the new war bond that has the kind of commando vibe to it, like a crossbow, throwing knife, like melee armor and stuff we'll talk about later. That's kind of sick. The R36 Eruptor also got a buff, increasing its total damage from 420 blaze it to 570 damage. So it basically increased it by what, 150? And that's kind of nuts. The R63 Diligence, which is the scout rifle, increased projectile damage against durable body parts from 10% to 25%. That's nice. And then moving on to gameplay, they removed the operation modifier AA defenses, reducing the stratagem slots by 1. They want to look over the operation modifiers in the future. Right now they think there's too few of them, which becomes repetitive, and the ones we have don't create a variety or promote different playstyles. I agree. For now, we removed this one because it only encourages the players to bring the best stratagems and does not promote variety. That's fair. Honestly, yeah, I think the best part of Helldivers 2 is being able to use a bunch of different stratagems to keep the game fun and fresh. I always say that. And the problem is, like, the A defenses was, I agree, it made you take like the best in slot, but like it also added a whole different difficulty to the mission, because you really have to play with cooldowns and play your life a lot differently than you would if you had like that extra stratagem slot to like pick up the slack. So I imagine they'll bring it back, but maybe with a different kind of setting. But I enjoyed it, honestly. I did. But it's interesting. They also disabled the retrieve essential personnel defend event missions for the time being. This gives the mission the proper attention and care it deserves, as it's now deemed not fun enough to perform as they want it to. Super samples now spawn on difficulty 6. The Siege artillery stratagem no longer blocked by stratagem jammers or ion storm, and it is available after mission timer ends and the destroyer leaves close orbit. That's huge. That is super huge. Enemies in melee range of gates in the evacuation high value assets mission will now attack it more consistently. Added the ability to chat from in-game menus and mission loading screens, which is cool. Quality of life are always fun. Armors, they added a new armor passive, Peak Physique. 50% increased melee damage and 30% weapon ergonomics. So ergonomics, I imagine, I saw that when they changed it for the AMR, the anti-material rifle. I believe it's just like when they aim in with the crosshairs, the bullet should go where the crosshairs are placed and not to the right or left of that. So I believe the ergonomics is like, yeah, how it feels like when you're moving left and right. I could be wrong, but they also changed some planets and hazards. So the plant spike that appears on certain planets has been reworked. It no longer causes bleeding or stamina drain if hit by the plant explosion or spikes. It now pops 3 times, sending spikes everywhere, dealing increased damage. That's interesting. The fire tornadoes also got reworked, so they should no longer feel like they're actively responding to player movement and should move more randomly. While a fire tornado storm takes place, enemy vision is reduced, but player vision is unaffected. That's kind of huge. A lot of people hate the fire tornadoes. I also understand, because they do feel like they're just following you sometimes, but they changed that. It should also not spawn on as many objectives and stuff, so there should be less overlap, so that'll be kind of nice. Tremors, I don't really understand the point of Tremors, but Tremors had their spawning tweaked to be slightly more random, and they had their epicenter size and effect range increased. Sure. Ion storms, they added additional VFX for ion storms. And visibility, a lot of planets have had their fog amounts tweaked to be a bit less harsh and dense to provide less fatigue from constantly fighting on planets with bad visibility. We still intend there to be foggy planets with worse visibility, but the balance was a bit off. So they basically changed visibility on some of the planets, and that includes artificial light sources. So they changed their intensity to reduce blinding the players. I think that's huge. That was like one of the biggest issues I had with Helldivers, just walking into an objective location and just being blinded. The unexploded hell bomb. So hell bombs malfunctioned, but now have been fixed so that they explode immediately if hit with strong explosions or heavy weaponry, and they will still have the same delay if hit by small arms or weaker attacks. So vegetation that's large enough to slow the player will now have an extra function. When inside the vegetation, Helldivers will be harder to detect, reducing their detection range by enemies. This effect stacks with other detection reducing effects such as nighttime, being crouched or prone, or things such as scout armor passive. So being able to stack those is huge. That's honestly really cool that they're adding changes to increase the amount of different playstyles you can have, like stealth. Enemies, the acid effect. The acid effect applied by hunters, bug mines, etc. now allows you to sprint while under the effect and slows you by 30% instead of 50%, but the duration has been increased from 3 to 4 seconds. These changes are intended to make it less punishing for players to be slowed while fighting the Terminids. This allows us to use it in more places without making the experience very punishing, for example the Bile Spewers. Cool. Cool. I did find that the hunters are a big problem, and that slow is incredibly abusive. Armored enemy balance. We've toned down the amount of heavily armored enemies like Bile Titans chargers on high difficulties and instead spawn more hordes of smaller enemies. The difference should be quite noticeable and the amount should be at least 30% less before during bug breaches. Nice, that's nice. So now they're moving away from just having everyone carry anti-tank weaponry and more for for just hordes of enemies. That makes sense because they tweaked a bunch of AoE stratagems like the airburst, like the Gatling, a bunch of the sentries and stuff like that. That makes sense, yeah. I'm with that, honestly. I like having a variety. Patrols spawning is back to how it worked before patch 1.0003 with some slight tweaks so the levels are less empty if you're far away from important locations with enemy presence. Okay, stunning. Medium and large sized enemies now don't get stunned as easily. This will not affect stratagems that stun and will mostly just affect how easily the pummeler can stun larger enemies. So basically the pummeler just got nerfed. Tough. Termids, bile spewers, and nursing spewers will now get slowed if they lose their legs. That's huge. Spewer puke now applies the acid effect, which we talked about. And the spewer puke can now only damage Helldivers up to 4 times per second, and the Helldiver cannot take damage multiple times from the same projectile. This should reduce the instances where you're instantly killed by that. They made this mechanic a couple times, so we'll talk about that a couple more times with the 4 times per second damage nerf type thing that they're trying to implement. So the Bile Titan also has this. So the Bile Titan head is slightly less durable against weaker anti-tank weapons. It's not a large change and will mostly matter for weapons like the railgun. I used the railgun and it didn't feel too different, honestly. I'll have to do more testing with it because I didn't do it extensively. The Bile Titan's puke can now only damage the Helldivers 4 times per second. That's again where we saw that. And the Helldiver cannot take damage multiple times from the same projectile. The damage is still very deadly though, so running through their puke is not recommended. But their puke also has a larger spread, which is kind of nuts because their spread was also already like huge though. The Charger Behemoth. The Charger Behemoth is now joining the battle on higher difficulties. It can now also take more damage than before. This enables us to spawn fewer chargers, but still retain the difficulty. Now, I'm not really sure what a behemoth is, a charger behemoth. Maybe it's like the chargers with kind of like the axe thing coming out of their face. I'm not really sure. And then chargers will now only show bleed out effects from the body if the bleed out state is started. It'll still show the bleed out effects from the mouth without having started the bleed out state though. Okay, that's nice. Quality of life change. So the automatons, the Hulk Scorcher. The Hulk's flamethrower now does less damage and cannot damage Helldivers more than 4 times per second. Again, that's where we see that. So they basically made it so that 4 times per second makes it so you shouldn't get insta-killed by a bunch of random damage over time applications, which is kind of really nice. The tank's armor value on the front has been lowered to be the same as the non-vent sections on the rear of the tank. The intent was initially that it was supposed to be more armored in the front, but the visual language didn't show that. The vents on the back of the tanks of the turret still has the same armor value as before, but we'll check for explosions directions correctly now. The damage of exploding automaton jump packs has been decreased by 50%. It'll still set you on fire though, which is huge because when I was playing automatons these past couple days for the major order, a bunch of the jump pack automatons, they would basically just, the meta would be, the automatons would just jump at you like 3+ at a time, and they'd just get right up to your face, you'd shoot them, and they'd blow up, and they'd insta-kill you. And it was super annoying and super frustrating, so I'm glad that they changed that. For the Galactic War, they introduced supply lines and origins of attack. Supply lines were previously not shown, but they added it because of the feedback from our community. You gotta love a studio that listens to their community. Come on, like that's huge. A lot of these changes are kind of huge, and they made a bunch of fixes. I'm not going to go through all of them. I'll go through a few though. So the spear targeting has been reworked and should now function much better, which is huge. But it lost its ability to target automaton spawners, but that's not intended and will be fixed in the future. So that's kind of huge. I mean, a lot of people have problems with the spear. The intense heat and extreme cold environments modifiers will now affect the quasar cannon. It should have already, but I'm glad that they fixed that. So the reload speed on cold planets will be minus 2.5 seconds, and the reload speed on hot planets will be an increase in 2.5 seconds. So I think that on cold planets, the quasar should be pretty much back to what it was before the nerf. So I'm excited to see that, honestly. And yeah, I mean, that's basically, they changed some other stuff, like the aiming in mech suits should be more accurate now. The ballistic shield now collides with grenades. There's a bunch of other miscellaneous changes, like the war metals cap is now displayed in the UI. They fixed bugs where Helldivers armor could be invisible to other players. You could read through all the rest of the fixes yourself, but I just wanted to talk about mainly the weapons and the stratagem buffs, because that's going to be the huge thing that I'm going to be testing in the future, and kind of like the big change that they made to the game. I'm really glad that they really listened to the community and started making the buffs that kind of were needed to keep the game alive. A lot of people stopped playing because they felt like the game was unnecessarily hard and less fun because there was no real change to the dynamic of play. But with all these changes with the mob spawns, the damage buffs, the weapon buffs, the stratagem changes, and basically decreasing the cooldowns of a bunch of things, it's going to make the game feel so much better. I already started playing it a little bit, and I'm having a lot of fun with the changes they made so far. I can't wait to continue, because there's so many weapons that they changed. It's going to take me probably weeks to get through everything. But I can't wait to start making videos on that to show you guys some of the big changes that we can see today. I'm most excited to try I'm more excited to try the bow, the explosive bow, because now that it can plug bug holes, and with the incoming war bond with the throwing knife, it's gonna be like kind of a cool meta to kind of use. I'm super excited about the new armor and upgrades that has as well. Honestly, like, it just kind of rejuvenates my my love for the game, and I'm really hoping that it does for you guys too. I want to thank you for watching. If you got this far into the video, you're the true hero. I can't wait to see you guys on the field, and have a good day. Have a really, really good day. And I'll catch you guys later. Keep in contact. If you have any questions, leave it in the comment section below. I'll be making videos on the changes coming up in the future. I'm sorry the video ended up being so long, but with all the changes, I wanted to make sure I got through everything for you guys. And yeah, I guess that's about it. I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.